All right, you know what it is. It is an Opposition Wednesday here on the Big Douglas Show. We will do everything we can to get you ready for the game on Sunday. To do that today, we brought in Ben Leber. Ben, thanks for giving us a little bit of time today.
Oh man, always a pleasure to jump on with the opposition and talk a little trash.
Absolutely. Let's see. You are a busy man, former third round linebacker. If I got that right, you are now the sideline reporter, and you also have a show on the ABC affiliate, Twin Cities Live. What is more demanding, playing in the league or now post league doing all the appearances?
Obviously there's certain facets of playing in the league that are tough and time consuming and mentally and emotionally draining, but I gotta tell you, man, it is kind of nice to be on a football schedule where you might feel like you're redlining for 6 7 months, but then you take a break. It was really nice to get done at the end of, I mean, sometimes middle of January, sometimes early January, and then you've got like 4 months off. I mean, there's just nothing like that. So I would say the grind is longer with the jobs I'm doing now because Doug, it just never stops. It never ends. It's year
Yeah.
round, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're on the radio 107 The Fan. What do you like maybe about the radio that the ABC job doesn't let you do?
Well, as you can probably appreciate on doing a podcast and stuff, is the long format is nice. There's something very comforting about being a long form platform that you don't have to be so concise. You can riff, you can have conversations. So much of TV is just like little bits and pieces, and you got to be out there, concise, on it. There's a little bit more intensity to TV, which I kind of like. The fact that our show on Twin Cities Live is live every day from 3 to 4 p.m. There's nothing like live TV. You just, hey, that red light goes on. Whatever you say, whatever you do, however you look, there's no taking it back. So I do like that intensity of being live every day. But I certainly love kicking my feet up, literally at times in the radio station and just having a conversation with the boys about sports and about the Vikings.
As a linebacker, I'm curious that the Vikings have kind of switched from the Mike Zimmer defensive head coach approach. Now Kevin O'Connell comes in, obviously more offensive centered. The way the league works now, I mean, is that the way you've got to go? Can you still win as the defensive front man?
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, obviously, there's different ways to skin a cat in this league, and it is a copycat league. We use that terminology a lot. That whoever sort of wins the Super Bowl, you think that's the blueprint to winning. So we've seen defensive head coaches win, we've seen offensive head coaches win. Um, I would say this thing about the defense: the our defense has really been sort of the weakness the last couple of years, and it's not really fair to always just blame it on Mike Zimmer either. Um, we dealt with a lot of just bad luck. We had guys that were injured. There was a stretch a couple years ago where we couldn't find a cornerback to play for us. We were pulling guys off the street on a Tuesday to play against the Packers in Lambeau Field on a Sunday, and they were getting 30, 40 snaps in the game. So it's not that you look at Mike Zimmer's defense the last couple of years and be like, well, he kind of lost his touch. No, he actually probably did a lot better than most people would have, given the circumstances and given the level of talent that he had to work with. But in the end, there just wasn't enough continuity. There wasn't enough of an upward trend with this team, and so I think that the defense now switching to a 3-4, definitely took its lumps in the first 3 4 games of the season, but these last 3 games they have been playing amazing football. They've figured out how to stop the run. They're getting after the quarterback a lot more. They are keeping a lot of the passes kind of in front of them. No big splashy plays. So I think this transition is actually happening pretty quickly for this team to go to a 3-4.
That makes sense that you mentioned the 34 there, because as I was looking at the roster preparing for today, I noticed that they had Dalvin Tomlinson playing end, and I thought to myself, really, that is surprising. It makes a whole lot more sense now. Ben, you played linebacker. The position is changing rapidly. Are we in danger of losing the position, or is it just changing body style wise? Because you got to be able to cover the thumper is quickly becoming a thing of the past.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the pendulum has definitely swung the other direction the last couple of years. They are looking for more, space linebackers, guys that can run sideline to sideline. But I think there's a trend that everything's going to sort of regress back to the mean, and I do think that offenses are starting to figure out, well, if defenses are getting lighter and guys are more athletic, a lot of teams have kind of figured out a little bit of this, kind of RPO air raid type of system where it's just all horizontal passing and stuff like that. Well, I think there's going to be more of an emphasis, and you start to see more of an emphasis in power run game.
Sure.
Detroit's trying to do that. Obviously, San Francisco does that really, really well. Tennessee does that. There are certain teams that I think are really challenging the modern defense and saying, all right, you guys want to have a 225, 230-pound linebacker that's sort of lanky and athletic? Fine, we're just going to put a big body on him. And what happens is guys can't get off blocks, and you start having success in the run game. And then it opens up everything. Now you can start throwing the ball all over the field because these guys are so focused on not getting their face kicked in by an offensive lineman or a fullback or a tight end. So I do think that it is going to start, switching back into more of a balanced look. And then at that point in time, you just have to look at your division and say, well, what's our division made up of? How do we win our division? We have to build our roster based on the two teams, the teams that we're going to play twice a year.
It's interesting. What do you think the over-under is for times mentioned Kevin O'Connell on the Washington staff on the game on Sunday? Have to be pretty high.
You gonna throw in Cousins as well? I mean,
we haven't even got there yet.
Yeah. So with KOC, it's gonna be, I would say put it at a dozen. What do you think?
Right.
What do you think?
Oh, I think the over-under is definitely at 10 just for KOC by himself.
Yeah.
When we talk about going, I'm curious, with the lack of practice time built in for NFL teams now, do you think some of what we're seeing, we were talking about the linebacker and kind of how it switched and spread offenses and RPOs, I mean, is that because teams are more and more being forced to cater to what the kids coming out of college can do? I mean, felt like used to be you were able to just kind of get them in the building, slowly bring them along and get them practice time. It's just not the way the league works, what with the new rules and everything for practicing.
Yeah, I really do think that it is a lot of things. I think from it is this sort of like top down, bottom up approach with football. Sometimes the rules and the rule changes the NFL makes, it does trickle down all the way down to high school. But I think when it comes to scheme, because college football is the breeding ground for all these players, I've heard for years the complaint that NFL coaches have is we can't find offensive linemen that can block, that can run block. All they've done in college is they get a 2-point stance. They block for about a second and a half, 2 seconds, and the ball comes out. And so I think because you have to win the game in the trenches, the way that they're finding and breeding and changing the game in high school and college, that has gone vertically into the NFL. And now the NFL, I think, has to adapt. They can't, and like you said, the limited practice time, it's not like you can take a guy from the Pac-12 or something, an offensive lineman, and in a few short months with limited practice time, make him into a road grading run blocker. That's just not going to happen. And then there's even more limited contact during the course of the season. So these guys they have to kind of come in just a few degrees of where what the finished product is going to be. And yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I don't love the new style of the NFL as much as I love the kind of the old school ground and pound a little bit.
We talked about the over-under for KOC. You mentioned Kirk Cousins. I would have guessed that it's at least 10 for him as well. It's interesting. People here very divided over Kirk. There was not a whole lot of middle ground when it comes to Cousins. You either loved him or you hated him. He was either a bust or the greatest thing that happened. Here's what I do know. He was better than what we've had here in a long time. And really, when you talk to people that were really close to the organization, Bruce Allen was here and was not going to be the first guy in the league to hand out a fully guaranteed contract. I really think that had a whole lot of what happened here in Washington that really doesn't get talked about enough. Do you think that they're happy with their investment in Kirk? And is he good enough in your mind to get the Vikings to where they want to get to go, which is with this roster, got to be the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're really happy with their investment. The first couple of years, I can understand why it was a little bit of a salary handcuff. There were some restrictions on what the team could do based on the guaranteed salary. But now that we've gotten past COVID, there's been the adjustments made. The salary cap has gone up. The salary cap is going to go up, much more considerably next year with these new TV contracts kicking in. I think with every year, Cousins' percentage of cap hit goes down and down. And so it's not becoming a burden to build this roster. And then from a talent standpoint, I'm a Kirk fan. I've actually always have been. I've never really wavered on that. And for those exact reasons that you talk about, those people and the fans in Washington, that what's the alternative? Finding NFL quarterbacks that can win you a Super Bowl aren't just laying around on the street. And I think Kirk is one of those guys that can lead this team to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. We all know that he's not Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes. We all know that he's not a top 5 or 6 quarterback, but not every top 5 or 6 quarterback wins a Super Bowl every year. Aaron Rodgers has won 1.
That's right.
Brett Favre won 1.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've always been a fan of Kirk. Of course, I'd love to see him do some things differently. Can he be more aggressive at times? Sure. Can he use his legs a little bit more than he likes to? Absolutely. But as far as him zipping the ball down the field, getting the team in the right spot, making unbelievable throws, and now with KOC having total respect and command of the offense and the team, there's no reason why all those things that he has and those assets, he can't lead us to a championship.
I'd have to imagine he's pumped with KOC in the building. It has to be an offense that is a little more quarterback friendly, something that Kirk's a little bit more used to. Got to be a relief to have KOC in there, I would have to imagine, for Kirk.
Well, I got to be honest, though. I think, the systems that he was in, let's just go back to like Kevin Stefanski and Kubiak.
Okay.
That was a good system for him.
That's true. Yep.
It was. He was successful. I think that he made a lot of big time throws. I think there was a lot of exit strategy built in where if things go awry, there's always a check down there. I don't think that this offense is, head and shoulders above schematically what he's been used to. I don't think like a Norv Turner offense would have fit him, but I just think that the biggest change for Kirk is the personality of who's running the team. Your quarterback, whether you like him or not, is your de facto leader on the team. And, they are, outside of the owner, the GM, and the head coach, the 4th most important person in the organization. And when there's not a connection, not a mutual connection between head coach and quarterback, I don't care what scheme you're running. I don't think you're giving the quarterback free reign to do what he's supposed to do and full ownership. And I think it creates divisiveness. So I just think that from a personality standpoint, that's where I think he feels the most empowered, not so much from the X's and O's.
A lot of people in Washington wanted Darrisaw out of that draft. How's he look so far?
Like an all-pro.
Yeah. Just knew it too.
Look, I had my reservations about Darrisaw myself, looking at some of the guys in the draft and, his last year at Virginia Tech. Was it at Virginia Tech? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Virginia Tech. I got confused. I'm like, wait, did he play at Virginia, Virginia Tech? They were a quick throwing operation.
Mhm.
You go watch his last year, and it's like, boy, he never going back to what I was talking about before. I'm like, he's never had to block for more than 2 seconds. He's super strong. Throws guys out of the club all the time. But I kind of worried about him as a pass blocker, sustaining big blocks as a left tackle against the premier pass rushers. Boy, he has proven me wrong. He's proven everybody else wrong. The guy gets it. He just manhandles people, and he does it so effortlessly. That's the thing I think is really surprising. You watch him; it never really seems like he's straining. Never seems like he's panicked. Has full control of his body. It's an absolute home run that they hit drafting him.
From the outside looking in, it kind of felt like some of the last couple of years that was what maybe they were missing was that offensive line. Now, I took a look at the roster. It's not necessarily full of a bunch of guys that you've heard of before, but it feels like the little bit that I've watched as a unit, they're playing much better than the line play they've gotten there in a while. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's totally accurate. I think a couple things. Obviously, those five guys have to work as a unit, but there have been some weak links. It's Brian O'Neill, premier right tackle that we've had, and quietly been one of the best in the league for a lot of years. It's like we never talk about him because he's so consistent. We
Right.
never have issues off that right side, and now that Darisaw is playing well, we truly really do have two great bookends. Ezra Cleveland, this left tackle out of Boise State, he kind of flopped around a little bit when he got to the team. They didn't know if he was a tackle or are you a guard. We had so many holes in the interior of our offensive line. They're like, well, can you play right guard? So he did that for a little bit. He's settled in at left guard, and I'm telling you, Doug, you watch tape of him, like he's a nasty player at left guard. Like he will take your head off. He's one of those guys that if Darisaw's latched onto somebody and he's a free blocker, he's going to earhole that defensive end and knock him on the ground. I mean, he just is a little bit of a rabid dog out there at times. And the biggest issue really has been the right guard in the center spot. Garrett Bradbury has been very underwhelming his first few years in the league. It's a position that he had to fight for this training camp. It was not a guaranteed starting spot for him. And he's played really, really well. He's gained 15 pounds this offseason. His anchor was always the biggest issue. He was getting bull rushed. And then once he started losing the bull rush, then he'd overcompensate, and then he'd lunge, and then all of a sudden he'd just get out of sorts. And then the middle of the offensive line was very porous, and getting pressure right up on Kirk. So that's been solidified. And then Ed Ingram, the rookie right guard that we have, he's had some moments. You look at this last game against J.J. Watt in Arizona, kind of got his butt kicked, but hey, he's a rookie. Like it's gonna happen against one of the best that's ever played the position. So. He's got some learning and growing to do, but he certainly is not a weak link at all. So this offensive line, kind of in a short time, has really picked it up and is not a vulnerability anymore.
Outside of that Eagles game, it feels like this will be their biggest challenge as far as an offensive line unit, because Washington last couple of weeks has really gotten it going on that front four. They don't blitz very often. They're able to usually get home with four. It'll be interesting. To me, that's the big matchup this on Sunday, as usually it is. But it's going to be a big one Sunday. It should be fun to watch.
Oh, I've always had a lot of respect for the defensive front that Washington's had. I mean, it seemed like even though there have been some maybe bad teams record overall, dude, that's a defensive front that knows how to get after it. And we are trying to get defensively to a point where we don't have to blitz and we don't have to pressure. And Donatel's done a pretty good job of doing that. But what you guys are doing there, dropping 7 and rushing 4, that's what every coordinator wants to do. And then you mix in the blitz when you feel like you just as a changeup. But yeah, absolutely, that is going to be a big thing in this game, is who's going to win the trenches when we have the ball, because if we can't block you guys and we can't pick up decent yardage on first and second down and constantly sitting at 3rd and 6 plus, 3rd and 7 plus, well, that's going to be a win for you guys. So those early downs, the Vikings have to win.
It's so funny because people in town here always are trying to, blitz more, blitz more, blitz more. And I understand that's the sexy thing, just send all kind of guys. But to your point, every DC wants to be able to drop 7 every time they can.
Well, look at Detroit. All Detroit does is blitz, and like you may guess right. You may have a guy that slips a block or just gets, and it's going to look great. You TFLs and sacks, everybody loves that. But if you keep blitzing and they catch you, there's usually only like one more line of defense, and that's in the secondary, and they get gashed so much when you watch Detroit play. That is the exact polar opposite of what we're talking about, and that's why I think a lot of teams they don't like to blitz because it does you open yourself up for so many chunk plays and splash plays. I haven't watched a ton of film on Buffalo, but Buffalo's defense should be talked about as much as their offense. Uh-huh. And I played with Leslie Frazier. Like, I know his philosophy. He's a conservative guy. Like, he wants to drop 7 every single play, almost to the point where we were changing plays on defense just because it was so predictable. But look, if your front 4 can get after it, why not have as many guys in the pass scheme as possible and close off any lanes?
Tell me a little bit about. I mean, the franchise got to be pretty excited to have gotten Hawkinson, in particular with Irv Smith going down. Irv's one of those guys. I really thought he was going to hit the league, running 100 miles an hour and just destroy the league. It didn't quite work out that way. I know he's a free agent at the end of the year. I'm curious if they try to keep those two together. I mean, everybody is trying to find those 2 tight end sets now. It feels like that's a good fit. I guess what I'm more curious about Sunday's game, though, is you mentioned stopping that front 4 for Washington. Tight end is definitely a big part of that. He can go run routes. Do you think he'll be settled in enough to be part of the blocking packages?
That's a great point. I don't think so. I wouldn't think so. Just coming in today is his first practice on this Wednesday, and then he's going to have a couple practices, and that's it. Like, I don't think there's a lot of carryover for what they do terminology wise in Detroit to what we do. So I would see him, at least for the first couple of games, being more of a third down guy and a red zone guy. Absolutely. If I'm the Vikings, I would bring him in and I would say, you know what? First and second down, don't worry about it right now. What we need you to do is learn our red zone package. And if we can get to him down there for 15 to 18 snaps in a game down in the red zone, dude, that's a huge win. That's a huge asset to have down there. Because to be involved in the core as a run blocker, dude, you really got to know everything that's happening. You can't have any false steps. You can't overthink anything. And look, he's not a great run blocker anyway. I mean, he's a position blocker. He just sort of gets in the way. Detroit obviously they accepted his blocking because they'd have him in the core a lot of times too. I mean, he could be, in the core and out of the core. I mean, all the time. So it's not like he can't run block. But I think it's going to take some time to get used to our scheme. And I think that's his biggest asset is he's the type of player. Now, I know that he's going to have to come off the field just because of conditioning, but he doesn't have to, he never has to come off the field. Like, that's a player you don't ever have to sub out. Like, you can run all of your packages, 21, 12, 11. He can flex out as a receiver. He can do it all. So that's where I think is going to give him the most versatility with O'Connell in his play calling is just keep Hawkinson out there. And now you got to defend both the run and the pass with him.
You think as we sit here now, they'll bring Irv Smith back? They'll try to work something out? Or you think that's the last time you've seen him in a purple jersey?
I kind of think it's the last time we see him. And it's unfortunate because his career with the Vikings has been marred with injuries. And, those aren't, most of the time they aren't ever the player's fault. It's just bad luck. So I look at the way Irv has played, and I do feel like why invest a decent amount of money into a guy when maybe you could just draft another tight end, or you can find a comparable guy for a little bit less money. Although I don't think that he's going to have any leverage to command any sort of big contract because he really hasn't done anything. But maybe it's one of those situations if he wants to come back and he understands that his fair market value is probably substantially lower than he was maybe initially thinking and hoping, then it's possible he could come back. But I kind of just feel like this is the end of the road for him.
It's odd with the two Alabama tight ends, right? Him and Howard. I think we're going to be wildly successful according to all those that deem people wildly successful, and neither one of them just kind of ever got there. Ben, the other thing, there are two things that strike me about the Vikings. One, we talked earlier about you don't find premier quarterbacks just out on the street, and they were able to get Kirk Cousins. I mean, I think Brady has kind of made it feel like, you can go get Wentz or you can go get Matt Ryan. And to your point, there's a reason why they aren't with the teams that they are before. Very fortunate that it worked out that way for Minnesota. The other one is giving running back second contracts. There's this thing in the league where running backs just don't get second contracts. How has it worked out for Dalvin? Do you think they're excited they gave it to him?
Oh yeah, yeah. He's an incredible talent that he's really hard to explain because he's sort of scampers and floats through the line and around the corner, and you kind of look at him as you're watching it in real time. You're like, wait, how did he do that? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't look like he's moving all that fast. But he has such a unique running style where his feet are never off the ground. It seems like he's always got 2 feet on the ground, so he's able to bounce off hits, absorb hits. He has a really uncanny ability to kind of find a crease in the offensive line where there doesn't look like there's any daylight. Really kind of the contrast to Alexander Madison. Madison has gotten a lot better with his hips and his vision and stuff, but he's much more of a downhill sort of vertical runner that's going to punish you when he runs. Dalvin just can kind of bob and weave, and then also catch the ball in the backfield. So there's been an increased emphasis to get him the ball more. Coach O'Connell talked about it sort of after this last game where Dalvin finally got over 100 yards, went for 111. He said, look, after the bye, during the bye week, as we self-scout, as every team does, we just kind of realized, our run pass, balance was a little bit off. He wanted to get a little bit more into the run game, focus a little bit more on Dalvin, and it paid off. The offense looked great. They finally scored in the third quarter, which they hadn't done all season long, which is kind of a weird stat and a weird trend. But I think running the football definitely, makes Dalvin happy, and it opens up this offense a lot more.
Where do you stand philosophically on giving running backs second contracts? I mean, it has worked out, as you say, in this instance, but generally, looking through the last 10 years of the league,
yeah,
the second contract's been brutal for teams to hand them out.
It has. I have a hard time with it because there's a certain amount of empathy and sympathy I have for the player themselves.
Sure.
It's a position that we all know that takes a lot out of a player, and they have a short lifespan. But it kind of breaks my heart that every other position, you tell these guys, hey, your motivation as a young player is to get yourself poised for a big second contract.
Right.
And it's, you can't necessarily say that for running backs. And it's not, so the unfair nature of it, I wish I could say that I'm not in favor of how the league is handling it, but from a business standpoint, if I were a GM, then I would say, yeah, I would not give these guys, huge second contracts. I would, search around, draft a guy, find a guy that can fit our scheme, and maybe just have 2 of them and do it by committee and save yourself a lot of money.
I want to get to the defense before we wrap today, but before we do, I'm just curious your thoughts. It's got to be, Thielen impresses me just by, they let Diggs go, which Diggs is great, but they got a great return for him. And one of those odd things where maybe everybody wins. They go out and get Justin Jefferson, and Thielen just seems like he rolls with the punches on it all. It's got to be impressive and nice to have a guy like that, right?
Yeah, Thielen's he's the ultimate pro, and he gets it. He knows that he's not the wide receiver 1 anymore, but with as many opportunities that Kevin's going to give to all these receivers, he knows that any given play, whether there's a bracket or a double or something on Justin, he's going to be the next guy up, and he's going to be the next target. And he's so crafty. There's a lot of people that just look at him and say, oh, well, he's lost a step. And I'm like, well, show me on film where he's lost a step. I don't think he's lost a step. I think he's every bit of as quick out of the break as he's always been. He's super reliable when it comes to his catch radius. He pretty much catches everything. And for being kind of an undersized guy, he's dominant in the red zone. So I just kind of love his mental makeup, realizing that he doesn't have to pout, he doesn't have to get, all upset that he's not the guy anymore. He's still making a huge impact. And the same thing with KJ Osborne. He's a guy that just goes out there and works. Both of those guys in the run game are very, very valuable too, because they do attack their blocking schemes and their blocking responsibilities, knowing that it kind of sets up a lot of their routes. The way that they come off the ball, the way that they stalk their cornerbacks, it makes the cornerbacks have to second guess whether it's going to be a run or a pass. And by the time they second guess, they're running past them on a pass route. So I think the way they marry up their whole get off and everything is just perfect for this offense.
I saw this morning that the Packers are paying Zadarius Smith $11.5 million to lead the league in sacks. Problem is, he's doing it for you, Ben. He's doing it for you guys. Has to feel good for him, and has to feel great for you guys.
Yeah, and obviously there's a lot of question marks about his health. The back injury that kept him out of most of last year, was concerning. Words are words, and that's the thing. He and his camp all season long or all off season has been saying, "Hey, my back is fine. I got it fixed." All the doctors say that it's going to be back fully, 100%. But you always kind of worry about these guys when they miss a lot of time and they have a surgery. How back are they? How much are they going to be 100%? And he's proven everybody wrong. I mean, look, the guy. He's a phenomenal pass rusher. He's utilized a lot on the inside part of our defensive line, especially this last game. When we faced a running quarterback that was Kyler Murray, they really kind of used him as this kind of like this hot knife through butter right in the A gaps to really force Kyler to make a decision on whether he wants to break the pocket. He knew that he couldn't rush up the field because of Zadarius, and so it really confused that offensive line and the way they're able to use Zadarius as this kind of hot poker. And that's really where he's been good, even with Green Bay. I mean, these big loops, these stunts that come from the outside in, or he's just used as a stand-up rusher on the inside. The guy kind of does everything. I mean, wherever you want to put him, hand on the ground, 2-point stance, doesn't matter. The guy has been our defensive MVP up to this point. And then, you mentioned Dalvin Tomlinson earlier. He's probably our second most important guy on the defense so far.
I've always been a big fan of his ever since Alabama. One thing Ben Washington doesn't lack for is offensive weapons. Who, with Heineke back under center, there's been a whole lot more action to McLaurin. Does Patrick Peterson star McLaurin? Do they keep their sides? How is the back end worked on the new defense?
I don't think that Peterson is at a point in his career where he's going to shadow a guy. I don't think that they're going to lock him up.
And it's Dantzler on the other side, right?
It's Dantzler on the other side. And he's had some good moments. He knows that now that Pat P is playing at kind of another Pro Bowl level, that he's going to get looked at a lot. He's going to get targeted a lot. And I imagine that's what that Washington's going to do as well. Is they're going to try to find those time game and those mismatches where they feel like they're more comfortable throwing at Cam Dantzler, because Pat P he's just really been phenomenal. He knows he's not a press man guy, for 60 snaps a game. That's just not his style anymore. He talked about this offseason how this defense fits his skill set better because it allows for a little bit more zone coverage, allows him to play with his eyes a little bit more. And as long as he can stay within a tight radius of the receiver and play with his eyes and his instincts, those things are just going to take over and he's going to make some plays. And so he's been doing that. I mean, I think he leads the league in pass breakups or something like that as far as cornerbacks go. He's been all over the field, making plays. So it's been a nice change for him schematically to fit into this defense. But to answer your question, I don't think we're going to single any one corner all day long on Terry.
I wrap these Wednesday shows like this, Ben. If Ron Rivera came to you and said, Ben, how do we beat the Vikings? What is it that you say to him?
Well, obviously, you have to test you've got to test our run game. That's number one. We've been much better. We were averaging like 76 yards a rush on defense the last 3 games, but before that, we were very, very porous. So I would still try to test the run game to see if this 3-game stretch is for real or if it's just a flash in the pan. Teams have been killing us over the middle of the field. I don't understand why Arizona didn't try to do that more often. Maybe it's because they know that Kyler is a shorter quarterback, and for him to sit in the pocket and throw over the middle of the field wasn't going to work out. But you look at where we've been the most vulnerable. It is right behind the linebackers, in front of the safeties, in the middle of the field. We have just been getting torched. Again, not for any, guys aren't hitting their heads on the goalposts because we like to play a lot of cover 2. We like to have a lot of two safeties back there. So they're making the tackles, but man, dude, it's like 15, 18-yard chunks, when teams got to have it, are hitting us. So I would say if your offense is patient enough, and pick up, 15, 18-yard chunks down the field, along with getting some balance in the run game, you're going to have our defense on their heels until proven otherwise.
Well, they've definitely been emphasizing the run game the last couple of weeks with Heineke back in there, so that makes a good amount of sense. What do you think the score looks like? Are we in? I was surprised that the point spread on this game is not real big.
No.
I actually was surprised by that. I guess Vegas is just dying for you to take the Commanders in this thing. What do you think it looks like? Sloppy game, high scoring game, defensive battle? Where do you see it heading?
I think that, I don't know. I think the Vikings win by like 10, only because I just think I like the way that our offense is trending. I like the way our defense is trending. Again, back to stopping the run and all that stuff. So I would put this game at something like 34-24 for the Vikings. So I'd take the over. There's just something in the air about this Vikings team that I'm absolutely bought into. I think they're going to travel well on the road. They seem to be very, very resilient. None of these like normal distractions for other teams kind of get in their way. They always have a good plan when they travel on the road. They proved that in London. So yeah, I think this is a 10-point victory for the Vikes.
Lord knows, I hope you're wrong. Dude, be nice to keep this thing close. I mean,
yeah,
you know what I mean? That's what I would like to see happen.
Yeah.
Well, Washington, though, to see whether the 3-game win streak is legit. This is their first, I think, real test against what I consider maybe one of the more complete teams in the league. Ben, tell the folks at home what you got coming up for the rest of the week.
Well, I got the show, the Twin Cities Live show. Again, that's every weekday, 3 to 4:30, and then I'll be on KFAN radio tomorrow morning for a couple of hits to talk all the same things that you and I were talking about. And then that's really it. And then we'll travel on Saturday. So after tomorrow, I just have the TV show on Friday. No radio for me on Friday. So I do want to say this though, since we're still going, I'm a huge fan of Heineke. Have been since he was at Old Dominion. When I was calling college football and kind of cutting my teeth, I did a lot of Conference USA games, and so just a big fan of anybody that sort of takes a chance on themselves like the way that he did. Believed in himself. Was asked by Coach Wilder, like, hey, why don't you come to this school that has never had a football program before and start it from scratch, right? Like, what high school kid says, I want to take on that challenge? I just think there's something special about him. And then, the other storyline is like, Greg Manusky, our inside linebackers coach, was your guys' D coordinator and was involved for a long time. So, he's going to come back, and maybe he's got a few insights on what's going on there too. But there's a lot of parallels, a lot of storylines. But I just want to say how much I just love Heineke.
Yeah, it's funny. He's the ultimate gamer, which isn't always used as a compliment. It feels like, but you can just tell that the guys in that locker room would do anything to get that guy a win because it's easy to appreciate how much he wants it.
Yeah.
It's easy to be critical of Heineke, and Lord knows I have. But that's more about his limitations, not about who he is as a quarterback and what he's trying to accomplish. Because you're right, it's hard not to root for the guy.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's very well said for sure.
Ben, we try to learn a little bit about the opposition every Wednesday. I think we did that today. Had a blast with you. Appreciate you coming on.
All right, my pleasure, man. And it'll be fun this weekend.
I think it will. Safe travels for you, bud.
All right, thank you. See ya.
Yep.